Today I want to talk about logs, and specifically the logs of a Rails application. Here I have an application that I have just started, and when I reload the page, I see all of this, and it's a lot of information, and it's a little noisy because even just like the indentation is a little weird, and then there are all these renders repeated. I would like to have something more compact, so if I do need to look at the logs, maybe in production, I only get to the important information. And so sometimes we add gems that write in the logs, or we just have a lot of information, and I think it's important to just narrow it down to the most important parts. So I'll show you how to clean that step by step. So the first part that I personally want to remove is the rendering of the partials. It can be an important information sometimes, but we already have the total time here, and this is what is most important to me. So I would like to just get rid of this line. So to do that, basically we can add a new initializer, and I'm going to call this logging.rb, and it can be something like this. Basically, the way in which action view adds these lines to the logs is through active support notifications. But if we unsubscribe from this specific render partial, and then we reload the server because it's an initializer, then once we refresh the page, and once we save the file, then those notifications should be gone. In fact, they're not there anymore. We're only seeing the rendering of the page itself, not of the partials. So that is a nice first step. Now, the other steps are removing the noisy logs from gems. Specifically here, I'm using these 3 different gems, and they all add something to the log. You see one is here, one is here, and one is here. So let's go one by one. I'm gonna start with rack-timeout, which is probably the most popular of these 3 gems. Rack-timeout every second spits out these lines that says, yep, when I haven't timed out yet, we haven't timed out yet. If it does time out, it spits out an error. So all these lines are info. And then if there is an actual timeout, it's an error. So what we want to do is simply change the level of the log, which is also documented in the documentation. It says right here, you can go and check that the default level. You can change that, and in fact this is what we're gonna do. Right here we're gonna change so that we only log errors and not info. So save this file, restart the server, and then reload this page, and now all those lines are gone. If the page times out, we're still gonna get there, which is important. So now the next one, this rails-autoscale, is something that we use to autoscale the app on Heroku, but it's not set up in development. And really, I don't need this information in the logs. I mean, it's already on Heroku if it's there. So I just want to remove this one. Now, rails-autoscale doesn't have the same API as this logger. I can't just set the level. I only can set the logger, like directly. So how do you set a logger that doesn't log? There is a way to do that in Ruby, and that is you set a new logger and you send it to this constant, which is like dev null. So it's a fake logger. It actually doesn't log anywhere. And so if we refresh the page, that line that was there at the beginning is gone. And so the only noise that's left is this HTTP cache, which comes from faraday-http-cache, which is telling us that we can use a logger, which is what we're doing right now, but we can actually be more specific than that. We can use the instrumentation and like write what we want in the log exactly as we want it. we subscribe to this notification, and then we output it however we want. So in this specific case, I don't want to get rid of these lines. They're important, but when I look at the logs, I always forget, what does miss mean? What does store mean? Like, what has actually happened? Was this page cached or not? If I only see these constants like valid, invalid, unacceptable, I have to think about it for a couple of seconds. So what we can do instead is just to make it a little more verbose, and we can write some code like this. This is kind of like copied from this example. It's subscribing, and then it has a case statement, and then in this case, based on the type, I'm going to say that we completed the request from cache, from the API. I'm actually giving it the meaning that, like, exactly what it means. And in order to implement that, we just need to make that change that's specified here. We just need to add this line to the configuration. And so now, if we refresh the page once more, the logs, they should look much cleaner. So these are the logs now. The request has started. I know which controller and which action. I know which endpoints are being hit by the API, how long it takes, and I don't have to think about it. You know, this was actually from the API because there was no cached version, because it just refreshed, and this was also there. There are no partial, just the render and the completed. And this is much more compact. In fact, if I load again, you can see that now there was a cached version, but in this case it was stale, and so on. And this helps me a lot to get rid of the noise. It just gives me mental clarity. And as you have seen, it doesn't take too long. I mean, we had to write some code, but you write this once, and then I think it helps you for a very long time. So whether you use these specific gems or other gems or anything that adds noise to your logs, you might do a favor to yourself if you spend a few minutes just making the log look as compact or pretty as you want it. And as a side note, if you have a service like Log Entries that charges for the amount of logs, you might also save some money. I hope this was helpful.